Hey everyone, this is Mr. Zach, and welcome to our online children ministry program at Chinese Christian Union Church. As we continue our series called This or That, where we will learn how God built His church by helping ordinary people make extraordinary decisions, and we'll see that in our Bible stories. And so, our big idea for today is that God can do big things through you, even though you're young. And again, for this series of This or That, it's pretty simple. Throughout the Bible story, I'm going to stop and ask you guys what you think is going to happen next. This or that. And you guys will probably, I'll give you guys some time to guess upon yourselves, and then I'll give you the answer. So, let's do a little practice round. So, as we are on our way through the last part of the Bible and hearing how God built His church by helping ordinary people make extraordinary decisions, we're going to get started by today making a few decisions on our own. Okay, so let's play a funny game of this or that as our practice round before we get into our Bible story where we'll be guessing what happens next. Okay, so here's the first one. Would you guys rather fly a helicopter or that, drive a monstrous truck or instead? Well, I'm not sure about you guys, but I'll probably want to fly a helicopter if I could. Let's go to the next one. Would you do this, become an astronaut, or that, or become a race car driver? Which one would you rather do, this or that? Well, I would probably become an astronaut for myself. Okay, two more. Would you do this, vote for who gets to be president, or that, get a job at the mall? This or that? Which one do you think you want to do? Either or, maybe get a job at the mall, who knows. Last one. Would you do this, go away to college, or that, get married? Which one would you rather do? Right? Okay, well, those were all pretty interesting choices, especially the last two were a little bit more confusing, but, did you notice what they all had in common? Fly a helicopter, drive a monster truck, become an astronaut, become a race car driver, vote for who gets to president or get a job at the mall, go away to college or get married. What do all of those have in common for you guys? Exactly. All of these choices, you guys are all too young to actually do, You're not old enough to drive a monster truck, you're not old enough to vote for the president, and you're definitely not old enough to get married. And so, when you're a kid, you probably hear those words a lot. You're too young for this. You're too young for that. Too young to do this. Or I'll tell you when you're older. And all those sayings. And, in today's Bible story, a man named Paul had something very different to say about that. So, let's get into today's Bible story. Okay, for more than 2 years, Paul and his friend Barnabas traveled to far-off cities telling thousands of people about the good news of Jesus. Paul used to be called Saul before Jesus changed his life, and Barnabas was his helper. During those 2 years together, Paul and Barnabas started a bunch of new churches all over the world. But now that they were back home, Paul and Barnabas had to decide what to do next. So, what do you think happened? They decided to visit the church they had started to see how they were doing, or that, they decided to take a break and rest up for the next big journey. What do you guys think happened next? I'll give you guys 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, the Bible says sometimes later, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let us go back and visit the believers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they are doing." But Barnabas wanted to take a man named Mark with them. But Paul didn't think it was a good idea because Mark had deserted them in the past. This was the first big disagreement that Paul and Barnabas had ever had, and it was a big one too. So, what do you guys think happened next? This, Barnabas finally agreed to leave Mark behind, or that, Paul and Barnabas split up and went in different directions? What do you guys think happened? This or that? I'll give you guys 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, the Bible said they had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company, as in they left each other. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the believers to the grace of the Lord. While Paul was traveling with Silas, he met a young disciple named Timothy. All of the Christians who knew Timothy said great things about him. He loved and followed Jesus with his whole heart. Paul was impressed by Timothy and wanted to take him along on their journey. But Timothy was really, really young. So what do you think happened? Paul said he would come back someday when Timothy was older and more helpful, or that Paul invited Timothy to come along even though he was young. Which one do you guys think? This or that? And I'll give you guys 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Even though Timothy was young, Paul believed that God could do big things through him. So he invited Timothy to come along on his journey. With the help of Timothy, Paul and Silas told a bunch of new people about Jesus, and they started a bunch of new churches. Timothy did such a good job that Paul eventually sent him to start a new church all by himself. At first, things seemed to be going great, but then, many years later, something bad happened. So, what do you guys think happened next? Paul was arrested and thrown into jail for telling people about Jesus, or that Paul got sick on one of his journeys and died. What do you guys think? This or that? I'm going to give you guys 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Well, one day, Paul was arrested and thrown in jail for telling people about Jesus. As Paul sat in jail, though, he couldn't stop thinking about Timothy. Paul loved Timothy like he was his own son. He had to come up with a way to talk to Timothy and encourage him to keep on telling other people about Jesus. So, what do you guys think happened next? Paul wrote 2 letters and sent them to Timothy, or that Paul invited Timothy to visit him at the prison. What do you think happened next? This or that? And I'll give you guys 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. While Paul was in prison, he wrote 2 different letters and sent them to Timothy. Both of the letters are now books of the Bible today. They're in the New Testament. The first letter is called 1 Timothy, and the second letter is called 2 Timothy. In his first letter, Paul told Timothy this: "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young." Even though Timothy was young, Paul believed that God could do big things through him. And he was right. Even though Paul was in prison, Timothy continued telling people about the good news of Jesus. With the help of young Timothy, God's church continued to grow, and the good news of Jesus spread around the world. A lot of times people tell kids, or maybe you guys, that you're too young for that. And sometimes, they may be right. Kids are too young to, drive a car or vote for the president or to do really things that adults can do. But that doesn't mean kids can't do important things as well. And you guys can do important things as well. And that's why Paul invited Timothy to be a part of his team. Even though Timothy was young, Paul knew that God could do big things through him. In fact, in Paul's first letters to Timothy, he told Timothy about 5 ways that he could be a good example to other believers. And so here are these 5 things. God says that you're never too young to be a good example to other believers. You can be an example through your speech, which is your first one. And that could mean that your words can be, let your words be appropriate, truthful and kind. You can be an example through your conduct, which is the second one. Let your actions show that you love and follow Jesus. The third one, you can be an example on the way you love. Show your love to everyone, even people who are hard to love, maybe the people that you don't get along with, or maybe even your siblings as well. And the fourth one is you can be an example through your faith. You can read your Bible and spend time praying to God every day. And the fifth one, you can finally, be an example through your purity. This is where you stop sinning before it happens. This is where you know what to do right before you do something wrong. And you can say no when the devil tempts you to do the wrong things. So those are the 5 things that Paul tells Timothy, and those are 5 things that we can do to be an example to those people older than us, or even to the people younger than us as well. You might have to wait to drive a car, but you don't have to wait a single minute to do something big for God. You can be a good example to other believers right now, actually. And that's what our Bible verse today says from 1 Timothy 4:12. This is what Paul said to Timothy. He said this: "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." 1 Timothy 4 verses 12. Even though you're young, God has a big job for you. You get to set the example of what a Christ follower should look like. You get to show everyone what it looks like to follow Jesus through your speech, your conduct, your love, your faith, and your purity. When people see your example, they'll be encouraged to follow Jesus too. The job doesn't start when you get older like an adult like me, but it starts right now at where you're at. When you're young, when you're a child, and you continue to do that when you get older. And so let this lesson be a reminder to you that God can do big things through you even though you're young. Okay? So great job, guys, and I'll see you guys around.